Every culture has images or word pictures we use to describe certain things. And sometimes it's unique to individuals. I remember years ago knowing of a little boy that when he was going to school and they were trying to figure out how this little boy saw the world, the teacher asked him what he thought the fastest thing in the world was. And he said, my uncle, he runs as fast as a horse. Well, nobody runs as fast as a horse, but in this little 5-year-old's mind that's just about to go into school, that was the fastest thing he could think of, was a horse. And he certainly thought his uncle ran that fast. We use images all the time. And we have images in the Old Testament, and I want to look at one of these images today. It's actually a combination of two different words. One is the word for hand, and the other word is, if I can do this, an outstretched arm. Hard to do that. Hope that didn't look too weird. In the book of Exodus in chapter 14 and verse 31, this is after God has destroyed the army of Egypt in the Red Sea and has delivered the sons of Israel through the Red Sea. He says in verse 31, and when Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. We have up here, and if you notice here in the New American Standard that I've pulled up, they have a number there telling you that this word that they have translated power. And I went through a whole bunch of English translations to see if anybody translates it differently, but they all translate it power. But it's the word yod. It's ha-yod. And it's the term that means hand. It was literally the hand, the great one. He delivered them. He had used his great hand, his great power, the extension of his power in his hand in destroying the army of the Egyptians. Great hand. We might not think of that image, but it was an image that they really understood in their particular culture. When we come to Deuteronomy chapter 9 and verse 29, we read, and yet they are your people, even your inheritance, whom you have brought out by your great power. Now the word power there, I have highlighted this word over here. It is our word that we looked at the other day. It is our term koach. And he says that, your great power. And it says, and your arm, the one that is stretched out, as I was using that illustration for a little bit ago, stretched out. So he's stretched out, stretching out what? What do you stretch out your arm for? Is it just the arm itself? No, I don't know if you can see this. I'm trying to do this on the camera and it's hard. It's the hand. It's the hand that is at the end of the arm. That is the key thing. It's this hand. And you're probably thinking, what in the world? Well, this is this picture that he's using. He has this outstretched arm, the hand at the end, and that hand was the place where the power was exhibited. Of course, then that also depended on strength in the arm. To hold an arm out there that the hand was strong, or to hold a hand out there that was strong, you had to have a strong arm. You get the picture? It's a word picture. It's a way their culture understood the idea of power. And hopefully maybe it's an image maybe that'll set in your mind. In fact, we have another very interesting statement in Numbers chapter 11. And this has to do with the fact that there are so many problems going on within the nation of Israel at this point that Moses is crying out to God and he needs help. And so God says, well, we're going to bring 70 other people in to help. But in verse 22, it said, should flocks and herds be slaughtered for them? He's talking about the food for all these people to be sufficient for them. Or should all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to be sufficient? In other words, I don't know what to do, God. I mean, these people complain and they whine and we've got problems all over the place and I don't know how to feed them. In verse 23, and the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's power limited? And again, this word power is our word for hand. But rather than hand as an outstretched arm, is the hand short? That's what this word limited is. Is it cut short? It's not a hand that's outstretched to do something. It's a hand that is short. His hand is very limited. He can't reach out to accomplish what needs to be done. He says, now you shall see whether my word will come true or for you or not. And he's going to take these 70 men and he's going to put the spirit that is on Moses and put that same spirit on these other men. In other words, the idea here is that God has power. That power can be extended out to accomplish the things that he needs to do. And yet sometimes people look at things and they say, oh, God's power seems to be limited here. It's cut short. He can't do this. We were looking at that the other day. We looked at, is anything too wonderful for him? Well, no, nothing is too wonderful for him. And his hand is not cut short. It is at the end of a strong, outstretched arm. So let's look at a statement with regard to us. Let's go over to the John chapter 10 and verse 30. Now in John 10, we have two accounts separated by a bit of time in which Jesus refers to himself as the shepherd, the good shepherd, the great shepherd. And we are the sheep. At that time, he was looking at those Jewish believers in him, but he says there were other sheep that were going to come and join together with these. And so in John 10 and verse 28, it says, and I give eternal life to them, that is to those who are sheep that believe in him, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my, what does he say? My hand. My hand. He says, my Father who has given them to me is greater than all. No one's able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. Verse 30, I and my Father are one. That word one is one thing. Because he said, no one's able to snatch them out of my hand. No one's able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are not one purpose, as some people would say. That's also true, but that's not what this is about. They're one thing. They are one God. They are one hand, which is, as that metaphor we just got done looking at in the Old Testament, metaphor for God's power. He's able to hold us secure. I run into Christians that don't understand this. They think in some way or another they might lose their salvation because they think in some way that salvation rests on their shoulders in terms of, I've got to keep myself saved. I've got to be good. I've got to do all these things. And yet we believed that Jesus Christ did everything initially for our salvation. Why do we suddenly change that? See, God saved us at the outset. He saves us now, and he will finish our salvation. He keeps us secure in his hand, in his demonstration of his power to keep us safe. Maybe that's something new for you. Maybe you've never thought of or heard that before, that he's the one who keeps you safe. It's his work, and it's his power. It's not that he's got enough power to keep you safe. It's that he has enough power to do it, and he does it. He holds us secure, and no one is able to take us away from him. And no one would include us. We can't take ourselves away from him. Worship him in that regard. Worship him for his power. Worship him for the fact that his power means we're secure. And that security doesn't bring then a casualness and a looseness of life. It encourages us even more to live like his sheep and follow his voice, as he says. Worship him for this. And with that, I thank you for joining me and encourage you to have a good day in the Lord.